إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه ومن سار على سبيله إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. فالحمد لله نحمده ونشكره بنعمته أن نقوم بدراسة كتاب جديد، وهو منهج السالكين من الكتب النافعة في علوم الفقه، في علم الفقه. فإن شاء الله تعالى نستعين الله، واليوم نقدم بمقدمة يسيرة لدراسة هذا الكتاب. So inshallah today we thank Allah Azza wa Jal for allowing us to begin studying this book in fiqh, or studying fiqh in general. The main book that we mentioned that we will be relying upon is Manaj As-Saalikeen. Manaj As-Saalikeen is authored by the teacher of Sheikh Uthaymeen rahimahullah, and that is Sheikh Abdul Rahman As-Sa'di rahmatullahi alayh. The main explanation that I will be referring to is this explanation by Abi Abdul Rahman Ahmad ibn Abdul Rahman Az-Zuman, and that is Ghayat Al-Mubtasim. Ghayat Al-Mubtasim is 3 volumes في شرح منهج السالكين. Also making reference to this copy of the actual matan that I have, which is الدليل على منهج السالكين. So with منهج السالكين they mention points, but with this it mentions the evidences for these points that are mentioned, inshallah ta'ala. But today we'll just do an introduction based on the beginning of the book itself. The author, he mentioned some matters to do with ahkam at-taklif, the ahkam regarding those who are responsible for the actions between the khams, al-ahkam al-khamsa. The ahkam al-khamsa, and that they are, what are the 5 rulings? Wajib, haram, mustahab, makruh, and mubah. Now, I will mention inshallah a brief discussion on the virtue of knowledge itself, from the virtues of knowledge, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So the author, he mentioned Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inu wa nastaghfiruhu wa natubu ilayh wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa sayyiati a'malina, man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlil fala hadiya lahu, wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. هذا خطبة الحاجة المعروف. أما بعد، فهذا كتاب مختصر في الفقه. هذا كتاب مختصر في الفقه. This is a concise book in fiqh. فينبغي للطالب أن يبدأ بالمختصرات قبل المطولات. What is best for a student of learning is that they start with that which is concise before going to the detailed works. The person doesn't throw himself in the ocean without learning how to swim. So you start off with that which is concise, تتصور المسائل, you get a general understanding first, ثم تتفقه وتزيد, then you go into more detail to understand further. جمعت فيه بين المسائل والدلائل واقتصرت فيه على أهم الأمور. And so I combined it within, I gathered within this book different masail, the matters that are discussed, والدلائل, and the points of evidence. And I restricted to that which is the most important of the affairs. So I restricted myself to that which is most important for a person to know, وأعظمها نفعا, and that which is most beneficial, لشدة الضرورة إلى هذا الموضوع, because of the dire need to this topic. نحن في أمس الحاجة في التفقه في الدين. we are in a great need of having understanding, gaining understanding of the religion. Because when it comes to fiqh, لا يخلو يعني ثانية من الثواني, not 1 second goes except a person في حاجة إلى الفقه. So the person is in need of fiqh. ليتحقق أنه يقوم بما أمره الله تعالى ويجتنب ما حرم منه. The person ensures that they're able to fulfill what Allah has ordained upon them and they stay away from that which they have been prohibited from. وكثيرا ما أقتصر على النص إذا كان الحكم فيه واضحا لسهولة حفظه وفهمه على المبتدئين. He mentioned and a majority of the time I restrict myself to the text if the ruling in it is clear, so it's easy to memorize and understand for those who are beginners. Why? لأن العلم معرفة الحق بدليله, because knowledge is knowing the truth with its evidence. And that's what is very important for us to understand when we are seeking knowledge. A person says, okay, what madhab are you following? X, Y, and Z. We don't blind follow a madhab. We don't have this ultimate fanaticism to a madhab. La. A person may study a madhab and gain understanding via madhab as a means of making it easy to understand, but not the objective. The objective is to understand the Quran and the Sunnah based upon evidence. And the madhab aids a person in doing so. But let's say, for example, I'm a particular madhab, and then in a matter, the evidence is stronger with another madhab. What do? I follow the stronger evidence. I don't say, but this is my madhab. This is the country that my madhab follows. And the likes. I can't leave the madhab. La, this is not correct. And subhanAllah, my trip recently was with one of the mashaykh in Egypt. He said, التعصب مرفوض في كل مجالات. This fanaticism in blind following is rejected in everything. When it comes to race, when it comes to friendships and the likes, everything that comes with this fanaticism has been what? Rejected. So madhahib as a means of understanding fiqh, the reason why it causes enmity between the people, because they give precedence to the madhab and not the evidence. A person is to say, okay, why are you doing this? Oh no, that's my madhab. هذا ليس بدليل. قول هذا مذهبي, this is my madhab, is not evidence. Why? Because the a'immatul madahib, the imams of these madahib, what do they say?
The madhab is
ما صح عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فهو مذهبي. Whatever is authentic from the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم, that is my madhab. خلاص. سهل. Easy. Now, but when it becomes this thing of we become enemies, we'll know my madhab doesn't, your madhab says you wipe over sock, my madhab says I can't. La, ad-dalil. What happens? Now we're praying Fajr what time? Roughly 6 o'clock, right? In about a month and a half, in about 6 weeks' time, there's some masajid, they're going to go back 4 hours. And again, they say, my madhab says I have to start fasting. So we welcome those to come to a different madhab, inshallah, where you can start fasting later and have a longer suhoor with Allahi ta'ala. But now, these are the things that causes problems and issues between the Muslims, at-ta'assub. And he mentions, وَالْفِقْهُ مَعْرِفَةُ الْأَحْكَامِ الشَّرْعِيَّةِ الْفَرْعِيَّةِ بِأَدِلَّتِهَا من الكتاب والسنة والإجماع والقياس الصحيح. And he mentions what is fiqh. Fiqh is knowing the rulings, the Islamic rulings, al-far'iyya. Al-far'iyya that are not from the usul. What do we mean by not by usul? You have usul al-fiqh, which looks at the principles that allow you to derive these rulings from the evidences. For example, Allah says, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ. أَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ, what does this mean? Establish the salah. طيب. ما حكم الصلاة? Wajib. That's fiqh. That's the far'i, the hukm al-far'i. الصلاة واجبة. طيب كيف عرفنا أنها واجبة? How do we know that it's واجب?
Because Allah commanded.
طيب, but where do you get that from? Sometimes command doesn't mean wajib. Hadith? What about it?
Hadith between a believer and disbeliever is salah.
فَمَنْ تَرَكَهَا فَقَدْ كَفَرَ. Now, but prior to that, the usul tells us al-amru yufidu al-wujub. Whenever you have a command verb, it means that on the basis, the general asl is that it means it's an obligation. So al-amru yaqtadi al-wujub. So when I see a command, it means that this is what? Wajib. Same way, if I see al-nahyu, the prohibition, فَهَذَا يُفِيدُ tahrim. So something is what? Prohibited. Now that is usul al-fiqh. Then we apply those usul to your fiqh, to the evidence. You say, okay, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةِ أمر فهذا يدل على وجوب. This shows that this is an obligation, has to be done. واضح? Remember this, because you're going to be tested. I told you. Yeah, this is not a chill out session. You know, bring tea and biscuits. Like, you have tea and biscuits when you pass your test, inshallah. So he mentioned بأدلتها من الكتاب والسنة والإجماع والقياس الصحيح. So these are the four sources of evidence. The four main sources of evidence is what? Al-Kitab, what's that? Quran. Was-Sunnah. Wal-Ijma', what's Ijma'? Scholarly consensus. And Qiyas al-Sahih. Correct analogy. Why? Because some Qiyas is batil. Al-Qiyas, هذا من أصول الفقه. To understand how to make Qiyas, now, you have to understand the illah has to be the same. The reason behind the ruling has to be the same. For example, any drugs that come out today or in the next 10 years, what are they yuqas alayh? Al-khamar. They make qiyas with what? Khamar. Anything that yukhammir al-aql, that distorts the aql, and this is going to have the same ruling. Why? Because it has the same illah, the same reason behind the ruling. And that's what allows us to understand fiqh al-nawazil. Fiqh al-nawazil, the fiqh of contemporary issues. So if something happens today that is new, that hasn't happened before, how do we rule upon it? We look at the matter, what happens? Is there anything that is similar that has occurred before? Anything similar that has occurred before that allows us to give the ruling. And this is where we use qiyas. واضح؟ He says وأقتصر على الأدلة المشهورة خوفا من التطويل وإذا كانت المسألة الخلافية اقتصرت على القول الذي ترجح عندي تبعا للأدلة الشرعية. Now, very important point that he mentions here. He says famous of evidence. Okay, خوفا من التطويل. I'm afraid that I'm going into too much detail. This is an introductory book. It's not for you to think this is the objective. You study this and alhamdulillah you're mutafaqih, mufti, khalas, la. You can't call yourself mufti after this book and start giving fatwa. La, that's not correct. Now, rather, a person studies this as a means to introduce themselves to fiqh, get an understanding of the matters that are discussed, then you'll progress in going to further details in more advanced books of fiqh. Then it mentioned when there were issues of differences between the scholars, and at some point we also mentioned matters to do with understanding khilaf bayn al-ulama and how to handle differences of opinion amongst the scholars, because it happens and it will always happen. But again, al-ibra bid-dalil, the matter goes back to evidence, not who says it, but what is said, what is the evidence for that point. Now, he mentions when it comes to matters of difference, then he has restricted himself to what he deems to be the most correct opinion. Because qawl al-rajih, when we say the most correct opinion, this is nisbi, it's subjective. to what that alim deems to be the most correct based on the evidence at hand. But another person may deem evidence stronger. You see? So when we say al-qawl al-rajih indi, laysa inda al-jami'. You see? Or you'll find al-jamhur al-ulama, majority of the scholars, they have said that it's this. But sometimes the rajih is within the qaleel, is from with the lesser group. Based upon what? Ad-dalil. It always goes back to dalil. Not people. Of the things that we want to come away from is not saying, oh, but Sheikh so-and-so said. Okay. You come to someone, you say, Sheikh so-and-so said, Allama, he said. And the person says, okay. You say, what? You're disrespecting the Sheikh? What do you mean, okay? Don't you know who the Sheikh is? No. But is the Sheikh a hujjah? In the 4 evidences that the Sheikh mentioned in the beginning of the book, did he say, وَقَوْلَ الْعَلَّامَةِ وَقَوْلَ الشيخ الفاضل هل قال هذا الكلام? Did he say this? Why? Because my Sheikh said is what? Is it evidence? Not in fiqh and not outside of fiqh. When someone comes, you stay away from so and so. Why? My Sheikh said. Say, Jazakallah khairan to you and your Sheikh. But where's the evidence? You see? Because whoever makes the affairs evidence, they follow evidence, they'll be safe. They'll be safe. Because if there's an issue, I have to stand before Allah, I can say I followed evidence. But if I say I'm following so-and-so's opinion, Allah understand. That's not a hujjah. And it's in all respect, no matter who the sheikh is, their statement is not evidence. Their statement is not evidence. Allah Yubarak Fik. I can't get rid of it. There's someone say I got the best filler. I keep saying you see. I can't help it. Allah Musta'an. You might have to find another one. I prefer to say ya'ni all the time. That one's a bit overused. So then he mentions al-ahkam al-khamsa. Al-ahkam al-khamsa. But before we mention this, inshallah, I want to mention a benefit. It says, al-ilm al-shar'i thalathatu anwa'. When it comes to knowledge, Islamic knowledge, there's 3 types. Al-ilm al-shar'i thalathatu anwa'. The first, al-ilm billahi ta'ala wa asma'ihi wa sifatihi, wa huwa ilm al-aqidah. Now, ilm al-aqidah. That is the first type. ما يتعلق بالله تعالى. The second thing that is mentioned regards the types of knowledge, معرفة تفاصيل شرعه. Some ask, can the qawl of tabi'in be used as hujjah? لا. The qawl of the tabi'in is not used as a hujjah, nor the qawl of the sahaba, unless it is ijma'. So when the tabi'i or a sahabi says something and no one opposes, it is considered to be what? Ijma', a consensus. But as for the infirad, just as a normal by himself, la, it's not taken as a hujjah. So the first type of knowledge is knowledge al-ilm billahi ta'ala wa huwa ilm al-aqidah. The second type, معرفة تفاصيل شرعه وحقه على عباده وذلك بمعرفة أحكام دينه بأدلتها ومعرفة ما يضادها وينقصها واجتنابها وتحقيقه. هذا في اختصار الفقه. فقه العبادات. Now, it's knowing the details of the Sharia and the rights Allah has of His ibad, and that is knowing the ahkam of His religion by way of the evidences. فهذا باختصار الفقه. Then the third type of knowledge is العلم بجزائه, وهو علم بفضل الأعمال الصالحة, of actions. So that's knowledge of the virtues of righteous actions. That's all the things that knowledge is referred to. As for knowledge itself, al-ilm, فهو معرفة الحق, knowing the truth based upon evidence. So when we say based upon evidence, then it takes us away from individuals' speech and statements, no matter who they are. So one does not get the Sheikh said this, the Sheikh said, okay, no problem. But what did the Prophet Muhammad say? Before the Prophet, what did Allah say? What did Allah say? What did the Prophet Muhammad say? Okay, how did the Sahaba understand this? That's evidence. Not my Sheikh said, my Imam said, my uncle, my granddad, who I love dearly, but they passed away, rahimahullah. That's not evidence. That is not evidence. Nor turning away from their statements, no, this is not disrespect either. But he says, how can you say this? This is Sheikh so-and-so, this is Alama so-and-so. Okay. Don't get upset. We studied in the books of fiqh. الدليل قال الله وقال رسوله وأجمع عليه سلف. والقياس. And there's no such thing as qiyas or ijma' unless there's Quran and Sunnah. There's no qiyas without Quran and Sunnah. There's no ijma' without Quran and Sunnah. And that's how you understand matters of evidence. %, yeah, Sufis, they say our Sheikh says that Salafi should be far from that. No.
Stop, can you please remind me what qiyas means again?
Qiyas, this is analogy.
Analogy.
No. This is when I take a ruling of something of old to apply it to something of new that has the same defect behind the ruling. So any drug, a person, no matter what drug comes out today or tomorrow, it's going to have the same ruling as khamr, for example. Why? Because the illah is the same. Also, when it comes to virtues of knowledge, the Prophet Muhammad mentioned, لا حسد إلا في اثنين. There's no jealousy except in two. Now, and his jealousy is ghibta. It's not the hasad that is madmoom. Rather, it's ghibta, which is like that jealousy that is wanting to be like someone else, but you don't want the favor to be taken away from them. Hasad is iradatu ni'ma ma'a zawaliha an sahibiha. And hasad is that a person wants the favor and wants it to be removed from the person who has it. Or sometimes they don't even want it for themselves, they just want it to be removed from that person, and that is even worse. No. But as for ghibta, this is to want to have the same as what someone else has. But the Prophet told us we can't do that except for in two matters. He also teaches us not to watch people too much. Don't watch what other people have. Don't study other people's affairs, what Allah has favored them with. That doesn't concern you. If you see something pleasing to you, that Allah has favored them, and say, Allah Mubarak alayhim. You ask Allah to place barakah in that, and you don't have any illness in your heart that you want it to be removed from them. So, it mentions regarding this hadith, وَرَجُلٌ آتَاهُ اللَّهُ حِكْمَةً فَهُوَ يَقْضِي بِهَا وَيُعَلِّمُهَا. And a person who Allah has given wisdom, so they judge by it and they teach it. And hikmah huna بمعنى الفقه, true understanding of the religion. Al-hikmah أن تدعو الشيء في موضعه, that you're able to put things in their proper places. When you talk about majalis al-dhikr, I don't know what you're talking about. When they do dhikr ijtima'i, then the hadith of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, qissa to Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, and that is the evidence that is not from the sunnah. When they're making dua, dhikr in circles. Now, also the things to mention, the hadith that is well known, من سلك طريقا يلتمس فيه علما سهل الله به طريقا إلى الجنة. Whoever treads a path, seeking knowledge in that path, Allah will make easy from the path to Al-Jannah. So the path to Jannah is made easy for the person of knowledge. Also the Prophet mentioned, طلب العلم فريضة على كل Muslim. Seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim. Also the hadith of the Prophet إن العلماء ورثة الأنبياء وإن الأنبياء لم يورثوا دينارا ولا درهما إنما ورثوا العلم فمن أخذه أخذ بحظ وافر. It mentions that the scholars, they are the inheritors of the prophets, and the prophets, they don't leave anything in inheritance from money, from dirham and dinar, any forms of money. Rather, they left behind knowledge. So whoever takes this knowledge or takes it from them, they have taken the greatest portion or the greatest fortune. Also we have the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, man yuridillahu bihi khayran yufaqqihhu fi ad-din. Whomsoever Allah wants good for, He grants him understanding of the religion. فهذا من أفضل ما يؤتى الإنسان, of the best things that a person can be given, al-fiqh fi ad-din, having true understanding of the religion. وقال الله تعالى هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون. Are those who know the same as those who don't know? They're not the same. A person of knowledge is not the same as a person who doesn't have knowledge. And being of those who pursue knowledge is of the ways that a person finds himself upon great goodness. As the Prophet Muhammad mentioned, الدنيا ملعونة ملعون ما فيها إلا ذكر الله وما والاه وعالم ومتعلم. The dunya is cursed that is within it, except for except for the remembrance of Allah and that which Allah loves, and a person of knowledge and a seeker of knowledge. As for everything else in the dunya, don't give it importance. Everything's going to come to an end. Hayat al-dunya, hayat al-daniyya, haqira, is something that is not praiseworthy, it's low. هذه دار الابتلاء, this is a place of test. ليس دار القرار, it's not the place that you're going to be forever. It's not the dwelling place. Rather هذا يعني ينبغي للمسلم كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كن في الدنيا كأنك غريب أو عابر سبيل. Be in this worldly life as if you are a stranger or a traveler. خذ الزاد المحتاج إليه للجنة. Take the provisions that are needed to aid you to gain the path to Jannah. وليس هناك زادا أفضل من علم. There's no provisions that are better than knowledge. وهذا الوحيد الذي أمر الله تعالى نبيه صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يسأل الله أن يزيده فيه. This is the only thing that Allah commanded the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم to ask for more of. وقل ربي زدني علما. You see, so this is important. This shows the value of knowledge, and a person should pursue it, not for the sake of praise, not for the sake of position, not for the sake of having authority over people and having followers, ولكن أن يزيل عن نفسه الجهل, that they remove from themselves ignorance, ويتقرب إلى الله تعالى بالعلم, and they're able to seek closeness to Allah with knowledge. Now, and there are many things that discuss the virtues of knowledge. وأنصح الجميع, and I also advise everyone to go back to the works of the ulama regarding the fadl of ilm, the virtue of knowledge. So the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned al-ahkam khamsatun. Also, I'll be referring back to my Sheikh Haytham Sarhan's explanation, hafidhahullah ta'ala. He has also an explanation of Manaj As-Saalikeen, which is a nice, concise explanation where he puts things in different tables and the likes. Now, but he mentions now the ahkam al-taklifiyya al-khamsa. And we said they are wajib, haram, makruh, and masnoon, ay mustahab, and mubah. As for al-wajib, these definitions you have to be memorized and written down, and you'll be tested on this. You will be tested on this. Ma huwa al-wajib? What is wajib?
Something that where when a person does it, they're rewarded, and the person that abstains from it gets sent.
Good. Another definition? When it comes to the definitions of ahkam al-taklifiyya, you'll find the scholars, they have two types of definitions. التعريف بالجزاء, نعم, وتعريف كما هو. You have a definition as it is and a definition by way of the reward. So هو ما أثيب فاعله وعوقب تاركه. It mentioned it's the one who is rewarded, the one who does it, and punishable, the one who leaves it off. This is ta'rif bil jaza. This is a definition by way of the reward. So we say ما هو ما أثيب فاعله امتثالا وعوقب تاركه استحقاقا. Or istihqaqihi is that which a person is rewarded for doing it as a means of fulfilling the commands, and a person who leaves it off is punishable, deserving of punishment. In adhabahu Allah wa in sha'a ghafara lah. Allah may punish that person, Allah may forgive that person. As for the definition that's not based on the reward is ما أمر به الشارع على وجه الإلزام, is that which the shari', who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has commanded to be done in a way that is binding. In a way that is binding. So when something is wajib, also of the synonyms that we have are fardan, faridatan, hatman, laziman. These are other words that are used to refer back to al-wajib. Fardan, faridatan, hatman, lazima. So what's the second definition that we mentioned?
That which the legislator
Something mentioned by Allah which is binding.
So something that has been legislated in a way, or something that has been commanded by the one who legislates, who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in a way that is binding. Now, ما أمر به الشارع على وجه الإلزام. Now that is wajib. The opposite, al-muqabil, ما يقابله, that which is opposite, that is al-muharram or al-haram, that which is haram, also referred to as mamnu'. Also, mahdhur, that has been warned from. Okay?
Sorry, Ustad, I don't understand the second example by saying by something which is binding. I don't understand the example.
If I say, get up now and go make me a coffee, does that sound like you got a choice?
No.
That's what it means. واضح? Just like that. So when you have a father and a child situation, like if the father says to the child, bring me a cup of water, the child understands it means what? Hold on, right now, right? They won't say, yeah, don't worry, a little bit. Nowadays, the millennials, they'll say that. Allah knows that. Those who are born after 1999. إلا من رحم الله. مشكلة. Today, the kids. SubhanAllah. The father says, bring me a cup of water. The son says, yeah, you do it. Bring me one first. Allah musta'an. May Allah rectify our affairs. So the understanding of al-amr, command as well, is fawriya. Something to be done immediately. When they sit down, it doesn't mean like in 5 minutes, it means right now. You see, this is al-amr. And that's why these things are known by way of the language. Okay, that's the relationship language has to usul as well, principles in deriving the rulings. So al-haramu, by way of definition of the reward, he did the wajib, it's the opposite of wajib. I.e., the one who leaves it off is rewarded, and the one who does it is sinful, deserving of punishment. ما أثيب به يعني ما أثيب تاركه not فاعله ما أثيب تاركه وعوقب فاعله. So it's the opposite of wajib. As for the other form of definition, ما نهى عنه الشارع على وجه الإلزام بالترك is that which the Sharia has prohibited with the binding sense of leaving it off. So it's binding to be left off. For example, Allah says, لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى. Don't come near the salah when you're in a state of drunkenness. So this is a command. This is a prohibition. Now, لا تأكلوا أموال اليتيم. Don't consume the wealth of the orphans. So with this now, we understand this is binding to leave this off. لا تأكلوا الربا. Don't consume riba. This is a command to be left off, binding. This is now, so a person who does it, then this is falling into that which is haram. The third type of ruling is al-makruh, which is something that is disliked. I mentioned ما أثيب تاركه امتثالا ولم يعاقب فاعله is that which whoever leaves it off is rewarded for leaving it off, and the one who does it is not punishable. You're not punished for falling into that which is disliked. However, al-afdal wal-awla and la taqa' fil makruh was better that you don't fall into that which is makruh. You don't say no, but it's only disliked, it's not that deep. La. A person should not be overly lenient in that regard. So I mentioned, as for the other definition, ما نهى عنه الشارع لا على وجه الإلزام بالترك is that which has been prohibited from the Sharia, but not in a way that is binding. Not in a way that is binding. Another word that you may hear is mubaghada. Mubaghadan, to say another word for makruhan, that which is disliked. Ma yuqabilu al-makruh, what is the opposite of this? Al-mustahab.
Mustahab, is that the same on here? Is it masnoon basically? So on the English translation it says masnoon. Is that what?
Masnoon
Yeah.
and mustahab is the same.
Okay.
So that would be another word for it. There's a number of words for it. When it comes to the Quran, you have to go back to the tafsir and see what is the ruling derived from that which is being mentioned. So al-masnoon diddu al-makruh is the opposite of makruh. يعني يثاب ما يثاب فاعله ولم يعاقب تاركه is that which a person who does it is rewarded and one who leaves it off is not punished. As for the other definition, ما أمر به الشارع على وجه غير إلزام. وما أمر به الشارع لا على وجه الإلزام. So it's that which the Shari' has ordered but not in a way that is bil-ilzam, that is binding. I think the name is Burayda, if I can remember correctly, one of the Sahabiyat. She was a slave and her husband was also a slave. But in the Sharia, if the wife is given her freedom before the husband, she has what is called the haqq of fisq al-nikah. She can have the marriage annulled. She has that choice to have the marriage annulled. It also shows that the woman was given rights in Islam. She doesn't have to stay to the wife of a person who's still in captivity as a slave. Rather, she can opt to have the marriage annulled. And that is what happened to this Sahabiya, that she did this. But her husband loved her so much that he would follow her in the marketplace and he would cry behind her. And the Prophet Muhammad said, go back to him. So she said to him, Atamuruni ya Rasulullah, are you commanding me, O Messenger of Allah? He said, Innama ana shafi'. I'm just an interceder. Showing that even though he said it in a command way, it wasn't to be understood as an obligation. Because had it been an obligation, she would have understood that she has to obey the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Also from the names of Masnoon is Sunnatan, Mustahabban, Naflan, Manduban, Raghibatan, Fadilatan. These are all different names of something that is Masnoon, yani Mustahab. Lastly, we have Al-Mubah. Al-Mubah وهو الذي فعله وتركه على حد سواء. It is that which leaving it and doing it is exactly the same. Whether you do it or if you don't do it, it's the same.
So
La shay. It's permissible.
So you don't get reward or sin.
You don't get reward or you don't get no sin. It's the same. Whether you do it or you don't do it, it's the same.
So what's an example of something that is al-mubah?
Al-Mubah. Wearing a jumper. If you do it, you don't. Khalas. Over your phone, for example.
Give an example of something that is said to be makruh.
Makruh, eating standing up. Or drinking standing up. Like this now. But mubah, wearing trainers, wearing shoes, wearing sandals, it's up to you. Whether you do or you don't, it's the same. No? Yeah. Al-asl fi al-ashya' al-ibaha. And the asl in things are that they are mubah. Now, so based on your intention, yes, person asks if something's mubah, like wearing a jumper, but I say I make intention to wear a jumper in order to be able to pray longer in the winter time. This now becomes what? Rewardable because of what? The intention. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. If my intention is for something to do with ibadah, now it becomes rewardable. It becomes rewardable. Is watching football mubah? Wallahu a'lam. Allah knows best. Is it sinful if we drink water standing up? No, it's disliked. No. So is that clear what we've mentioned so far? Any questions? Fine. When we look at this book itself, which is what's going to come, this book is divided into two sections. Al-Ibadat, the fiqh of worship, and that consists of Kitab al-Tahara, the book of purification, As-Salah, the book of Salah, Wal-Janaiz, the book of funerals, Wa Az-Zakat, the book of Zakat, Wa Kitab al-Siyam, the book of fasting, Wa Kitab al-Hajj, the book of Hajj, Wa Kitab al-Jihad. No, and then you have Kitab al-Mu'amalat. The second part of fiqh is the of Mu'amalat, different transactions and dealings. So with that you find Kitab al-Buyu', book of transactions, or buying and selling, and Nikah, marriage, Talaq, divorce, At'ima, foods, Al-Hudud, which is punishments, كتاب القضاء والدعوة والدعاوى والبينات وأنواع الشهادات. So other matters to do with judicial matters. كتاب المواريث, inheritance. As-Sadaq, which is the mahar. And other than this that is mentioned in the books of fiqh. So inshallah ta'ala, we will start off with Kitab al-Siyam, because obviously Ramadan is approaching. So we do the book of Siyam first, and then from there we go back to Kitab al-Tahara, inshallah. So the book of Siyam first because Ramadan is approaching, and then we go back to the initial part, inshallah ta'ala. This is the English. It's called The Path of the Wayfarer. It's 2 volumes. I think you can get it on Amazon, but it's a very good translation. For those who want a translation, inshallah, 2 volumes. The Path of the Wayfarer, Manaj As-Saalikeen, translated by Al-Mubtasim. Now, so I'd advise you to get that copy, inshallah, if you're following English, or if you're following Arabic, then you can get the Arabic version as well, the matter, inshallah. There's many prints of that. طيب. Is it sunnah disclosed to do fiqh of fasting before Ramadan? They would do, generally speaking, fiqh according to the Mawsim, according to the scene. So during the time of Hajj, before Hajj, they would do Kitab al-Hajj. Now, before Ramadan, they do fiqh of Siyam. Yes, that is the way of the scholars, and it makes sense. It makes sense. Now, any other questions?
What was the second definition for mustahab?
مستحب ما طلبه الشارع ما أمر به الشارع لا على وجه الإلزام. So what was commanded by the Shari', not on the aspect of being binding, not as binding.
So the book is divided into ibadat, and what was the second one?
Mu'amalat. Any other question? خلاص نكتفي بهذا ونستأنف في الدرس القادم. إن شاء الله we will resume next lesson with fiqh of Siyam. بارك الله فيك ونصلي وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.